In 2010, Steven Strasburg would make his major league debut for the Washington Nationals. This event would trigger one of the biggest trading card booms in history, and eventually would cost me $2.4 million in one of the greatest sports card chases of all time. Thank you everyone for joining in for episode 2. This is going to be the most important story, the most craziest story I ever tell. I have been foaming at the mouth to get this story out, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. This is the most influential part of my entire journey collecting Tim Lincecum baseball cards, and I think this should be a feel-good story for everyone that listens. So this story actually starts with a player other than Tim Lincecum. In 2010, Nationals prospect Steven Strasburg made his debut against the Pittsburgh Pirates. This was one of, if not the biggest hype trains that have ever hit the MLB and the card market. He struck out 14 players in his debut, absolutely rocked the Pirates. And it really kind of was apropos for really what would come with his cards. Really, that night and everything that led up to his debut, it kind of made to set the precedence for what would be one of the biggest events in really the history of modern sports card collecting. One of his cards would end up determining the framework of the term Holy Grail in the card industry. 2010 Bowman and 2010 Bowman Jumbo would come out that year, and this was probably the highest touted, highest anticipated release of a sports card product I've probably ever seen. The 2018 Ohtani Bowman was up there as well, but I think Strasburg topped it. But it wouldn't be until a man in Michigan, I believe, pulled the Steven Strasburg Superfractor card out of this product. It was his Prospect Superfractor. Now, something kind of confusing is Strasburg didn't have an autographed Superfractor. He just had the non-auto. And in a later Bowman product, Bowman Chrome, that came out afterwards, he would have a signed Superfractor auto. Basically, a gentleman would pull the non-auto Steven Strasburg Superfractor rookie card out of a pack. Later on, he would put it on auction, and eventually it would get over $16,000, which at this time in the hobby was unheard of for modern cards. And as I said before, this Superfractor sale would kind of set the market and the attitude towards what a player's best card is, which would be the Superfractor. Which brings us to the next part of the story. In 2010, this sale would catch my eye. And although this card was already on my radar up to this point, it kind of set in stone what the goal for the rest of my collecting journey would be. The Strasburg Superfractor was never on my to-do list, but another card was. This card I would obsess over for the next 10 years of my life. In 2007, Tim Lincecum made his rookie debut for the San Francisco Giants. And alongside that came 2007 Bowman Chrome and 2007 Bowman Draft Picks and Prospects. Lincecum had 3 Superfractors in this entire product run. The first off was the Bowman Chrome Superfractor Autograph, BC238, his card number. Alongside that, in Bowman Chrome came his non-autograph Superfractor rookie as well. So you had his Prospect Auto Super and his rookie non-auto Superfractor. Then would come Bowman Draft Picks and Prospects, where you would have, weirdly enough, this was kind of the modern change where Topps kind of wanted to put players in more products, allegedly, where they, there would be more headliners for, the sets they released. So normally a player wouldn't have 3 rookie Bowman Supers in 2007, but since Lincecum was so highly touted, they also put him in Bowman Draft. Nevertheless, 2007 Bowman Chrome would release on August 21st, 2007. About 2 months after release, someone on Blowout Forums would make a post saying that they pulled the Tim Lincecum Superfractor autograph. Everyone went wild. This was the number one card to chase in the nation, in the world at the time, and there were so many people after it, ripping packs left and right. And finally, after 2 months, really not that much of a wait, someone had pulled it. At least that's what people thought. Fast forward to Memorial Day of 2008. It was a lovely day at Bob's Sports Cards in Howell, New Jersey, and a gentleman walked into the shop and wanted to bust some wax. And Bob had 2 boxes left of 2007 Bowman Chrome. Although the Lincecum Superfractor Auto had already been pulled, it was still a very valuable rip to make because many of Lincecum's higher-end auto cards from the set were still fetching thousands of dollars. The old saying was, at that point in time, you needed to pull out a second mortgage on the house if you wanted a Lincecum autograph. Anyways, the gentleman buys a box and rips it open. Nothing really to note in there. And he thinks, well, as most of us say, you can't leave the last box. So Bob hands him the last box and he rips it open. Couple packs in, boom! Lincecum Superfractor autograph. Now, Bob and this customer weren't aware that the Lincecum Superfractor Auto had already been pulled, and they wouldn't know until that night. The gentleman who pulled the card later listed the card that night. I believe he put it on Twitter and eBay, and it didn't take long for someone to reach out and buy the card. Instantly, people were very confused because, well, the same card, which is one of one, had been pulled already. Supposedly, people wanted to know, hey, is this a mistake? Did Topps put out 2 of the same one-of-one card? How did Lincecum sign 2 Superfractor one-of-one autos? What happened here? What would follow was a lot of internet sleuthing. People would be trying to uncover answers from Topps, from other places on the internet, from forums and whatnot. And really, the only conclusion that they could come to was that there was 2 Tim Lincecum Superfractor autograph cards. And how they figured this out was someone found a picture of an uncut sheet of Superfractors of this card. One that was probably a test run sheet from the factory. And on this sheet, you will notice there is 2 cards of each player. And I don't know how the rumor got started, but the rumor was that Topps would give 1 Superfractor auto to the player on the card who signed it and put 1 in the packs. Now, in this theory, I don't know if it was specified that each of them were serial numbered one of one. I never really understood that or really heard anything about that. But this was a pretty solid claim for a while. I don't believe Topps ever commented on it. But it wouldn't be till later we figured out the real reason there was 2 Tim Lincecum Superfractor autos. The reason? There's not. The person who originally posted the Tim Lincecum Superfractor auto first on Blowout Forums was a fake. It was a photoshopped image of the card. They never truly had it. So the one that was pulled at Bob's shop that night was the real deal. After the gentleman posted the card on eBay and Twitter, it would sell the same night he pulled it. The buyer, who we will call William, is a famous collector that was known well around all of the forums and hobby parts. William was a big Superfractor collector. Most people knew this. William would go around eBay buying cards left and right. These were high dollar cards, and it was not very hard to notice. William ended up buying the Tim Lincecum Superfractor Auto for $4,500, which at the time was quite a bit for a modern sports card. Then, it wouldn't be until 2010 that I would get the guts to message William. I found William on eBay pretty easily, and I think I was probably around 12 years old when I messaged him, and I basically said, hey, I'm a huge Tim Lincecum fan. I've tracked the whereabouts of this Tim Lincecum Super Auto. I heard you might have it. That's absolutely amazing. I told him I only have one question for you. I would love to see a non-scan, well-taken photo of this card just to put my eyes on it, because the only photo we had was a scan of it, which didn't really do the card justice. I didn't really expect a response. I was hoping for one, and I believe about a day later I did get one. Really loved my story. I told him about how I fell in love with baseball because of Tim Lincecum and how much I just adored this card he had. And so he gave me his personal email. He said, hey, hit me up. I'll send you a picture of the card. No problem. It's always great to meet another Giants fan. So I did. He ended up sending me this picture that I'm going to share today. And when I saw this picture, I just lost it. It was the Tim Lincecum Superfractor Auto, the Tim Lincecum Red Refractor Auto numbered to 5 in a PSA 10, and the 2007 Bowman Sterling Red Refractor 1 of 1 of Lincecum. 3 of his best cards of all time. And I didn't even know he had the other ones, but when I saw that, I almost dropped my phone. And what was so cool was that no one had really seen this. Everybody had just seen a scan of the card. So many people were after it. Still, after William had got it, so many people wanted it. And for me to see something that really no one else had, it was a cool moment for me as a young collector to have that experience. I told William thank you 100 times. And I mentioned, hey, I'm probably never going to be able to buy this card off of you, nor do I think you would ever sell it. But if you decide to sell it, please keep me in mind. I will try to make a play for the card. And he said, okay. He said, I'll let you know if I ever decide to move it. At that point, I never saw William moving that card in my head. He was such a big collector and such a big Giants fan that I'd never thought that card was going to be available. Really what flagged me on it was in 2017, I got a text from somebody who was consigning a lot of Lincecum high-end cards, and most of them are rookie cards. And he basically said, and I thought he was joking, but he was talking about William, and he said, hey, you should offer William $10,000 for his Tim Lincecum Superfractor Auto. I think he would sell it. And now that I think about it, and with the knowledge I have, I think this guy was consigning for William, and I think this was just a tip to me that, hey, that's kind of where he's at on it. I don't know that for sure, but it's kind of what it seemed like. And later on is when things would start to move. I was having probably one of the worst days I've ever had. I was in college at the time. I kind of had a day in class that was just really brutal. I think I did bad on a test or something, and had a couple meetings with some advisors and stuff, and they were just very critical of, my studies and whatnot. And so it was just a very rough day, and I felt really behind academically and physically and mentally that day. And so I went home, and I'd had such a bad day that I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go shower, and I'm gonna basically just try to rinse this one off. And before hopping in the shower, I get a text from Jackson, and it says, hey, look what I just picked up. It was all 3 of the cards in the picture William had sent me when I was 12 years old. I couldn't believe my eyes. I kind of sat in my bed for a sec. So much of me was happy for Jackson. and I don't want to make it seem like I wasn't, but this was a life goal of mine. And to see it slip away, and I felt so disappointed that I didn't get, a word in on the deal. And it shocked me to my core. So basically, I congratulated him. I said how, I got the whole scoop on how he did it and whatnot. And so we talked for a while, and it was cool, maybe later on I would have a chance for this card. That was in the back of my head. I'm always an optimist. But I stood up, put my phone down after I got done talking to Jackson, and I started towards a shower, and I just started crying. And I can still, in my memory right now, with how bad that day was, and then all of it escalating to that, I can still feel the sorrow that I was feeling. I have muscle memory from it. Some comic relief in all of it, if you call it that, was I had a JBL speaker. And so I ended up taking this shower. I'm still going to go rinse off. I take my JBL speaker with me. I was setting it up. I pressed the on button. And I didn't know that music was just going to play instantaneously. And I also didn't know that the volume was all the way up. Music plays at 140 decibels. And it scares the shit out of me. And my only reaction, and keep in mind, this speaker was probably $120. I took that speaker and I Gronk spiked it into the ground. And it went into a million pieces. And honestly, made me feel better. I have to say, it didn't fix anything, but it sure made me feel better. And I got in the shower, called it a day. Sometimes you just got to call it a day, go to bed, I got to know a little bit more about how Jackson pulled off this deal. And ironically, one of the coolest things of how he did it was he ended up selling a Babe Ruth cut auto to kind of bolster the purchase. Again, something he was really good at was moving things around. And it's so cool to think that, a Babe Ruth cut auto was essentially traded for a Lincecum Superfractor autograph, which is one of the things I nerd out over. Then comes a year later. In 2018, I would get the chance of a lifetime. Not a guaranteed chance, but it was something. In 2018, Jackson would let me know that he was going to list the Superfractor on eBay just to see if any crazy offers come around, because at this point, the sports card market, again, was growing exponentially. And I believe he listed it for around $15,000 to $20,000 on eBay, buy it now, or best offer. And, when I saw that happen, the wheels really started turning in my mind. And I was like, you know what? He doesn't seem all too keen to sell it for, a reasonable price. But why don't I start making moves now? Because that's what I didn't like earlier. I didn't have a chance to really get my bearings about me and, sell some cards, move some things around to make a play. So I call Jackson and I get on the phone with him and I'm talking about how realistically he is to move this card. And, at first he said he really doesn't want to, but, given the right circumstances, he would. And I was very excited, but I was very scared because he did list this on eBay. And, I'm not going to bat an eye to him keeping the card on eBay. It's his card. He can do what he wants with it. And, the ball was in my court. No pun intended. And so that night, I began selling cards left and right. In my personal collection, I had probably around $10,000 to $12,000 worth of Lincecum cards, and any of them were up for grabs. This was I don't want to call it a fire sale. I was very slow and methodical with it. I was careful. But it was a fire sale for sure. Like, we were, with it still being on eBay, we were in some hot water, and I wanted to get this done, and I wanted to do it now when it's available. He could always change his mind, and the plans really started right then and there. Jackson had ended up taking it off of eBay. I had managed to talk enough to him about what I could do for the card, and what a deal would look like. And honestly, he didn't want to sell it. It still was bothering him that it was on eBay. That was half the reason he took it off. And so here we are a month later, and he notifies me that, hey, I got a wedding coming up. And, I didn't really realize it was going to be this expensive after all said and done. And he said, I'm more serious now about moving this Superfractor auto. And that's when really for me it clicked. And I was like, okay, let's start talking. Without even the money in the pocket, I started talking a deal for this card. Because really all you got to do is commit and set a time frame. That's all you got to do. We had a series of phone calls about this card. And, each time, I was so giddy and I was so excited to be in this discussion. But at the same time, my palms were very sweaty each and every time. And I used a lot of negotiation techniques that I was novice on, but I had to do everything I could to make sure that this deal would go through. I didn't want to seem too desperate for it, even though I'm the most desperate person in the world for this card, and he honestly knew that. But, I didn't call him every time. Sometimes he would call me. I'd let him come to me every now and then. And really what it boiled down to was, I think it was a Wednesday. I called my dad and I said, hey, I have an opportunity right now to get the card. And I said, I'm going to take this. And I think I'm going to sell a bunch of my cards. And this really worried my dad. Keep in mind, I'm in college. I never sell my Lincecum cards. He knows that. And my dad was shocked. And he was very concerned that there was like a drug issue or something here, because this isn't something Tom would do. And so my dad goes, do you have a deal for this card yet? Is that why you're going to sell? And I go, no deal yet. And he's like, okay, that's, I mean, what are you planning to do here if you don't get the card and you just sold all of your cards for nothing? And I was like, man, that's a risk I'm going to take right now. That's a risk I'm wanting to take, because I felt how bad it was to miss out on this the first time. I can get those cards back. I can't get this card back ever. And so what I ended up doing was, I believe a couple days later, I made my first offer for the card. And, to expedite the process, Jackson didn't need, a full amount for the card in cash. He's still a very big collector. And there were still cards that I had that would entice him. So basically I came to Jackson. I said, hey, I'm ready to talk with you about numbers. I think I've done an estimation, and I think I can get around $3,000 in cash for you and trade you a plethora of cards. So it's a very short conversation. We get off the phone kind of knowing where each other's at. Later on, he would call me again. I can remember the exact scene of which it was. I was at my card desk, my studies desk, and I was sitting there waiting for it. I was staring at my phone on the table. And he gives me a call. And he says, hey, I think we're close. And man, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And I go, okay, tell me what you need. And he goes, I want to do $3,600 in cash, and I want $3,500 in cards. And I go, I'm going to do it. Let's do it. And he goes, I'll do it with you, but I maintain the ability to pull out at any time. That didn't sound right. Let me rephrase that. I'm going to keep that in the video. He says, I'll do the deal with you, but I reserve the right to cancel the deal at any time if I want to keep the card. And, at the time, I didn't really care. I'm going to push this thing through the uprights, and we're going to take a chance on it. And so I got off the phone with him, and my palms right now are sweating. You can see they're kind of red. I'm sweating just thinking about hanging up that phone. And I set it on my desk, and I did a classic little lean back in my rolly chair, and I go, oh my God, I did it. And I swear to you, I didn't waste a single second. I was in Manhattan, Kansas at college. My home was in Shawnee, Kansas. And my cards were at home in Shawnee, Kansas. I hang up this phone. I will admit I sat there for about 5 minutes just staring at the wall, thinking about what I had just done. And just smiling, just so much thoughts running through my head. I get up right away, and I get my keys. I get a couple of duffel bags that I had, and I drive 2 hours to Shawnee, Kansas right away. I get home, and I tell my parents, I'm just gonna be here for a bit. I gotta go home later tonight. Usually I'd stay home for maybe the weekend or something like that. But I told them, I'm gonna be here for probably 4 hours, and then I gotta head back tonight. And so I packed 2 duffels full of Lincecum baseball cards and other Giants baseball cards. My dad just biting his nails, not knowing what's going on because it just didn't seem normal to him that all this was happening. So after packing the duffels, I stayed with my parents and ate dinner. We didn't really talk about what was going on at all. I think my dad kind of wanted to ignore it in a way. And my mom didn't know anything about it. So we wanted to keep all of it that way. And so essentially, I drive back home that night and I get to selling. I'm pulling some all-nighters, just slinging cards on eBay. A lot of collectors had known, about my collection and had, reached out to me times before that to ask, if I would sell any of the cards. And, the answer was always no. But on this day, a text went out to around 7 to 10 different collectors saying, hey, the lines are open. Almost any card I have is available. And let's get to making some deals. Everything came together pretty much seamlessly. I was able to get the cash in less than 2 weeks. And, we got to that final day where I had to text Jackson, say, hey, you good for a phone call? And, he called me up and he goes, are we square? And I go, we're square. And I go, the ball's in your court. Or, is this a done deal? And he said, yes, it's a done deal. I'm packing up the card right now. And it really felt like I was in some sort of lucid dream. It was, I can't even put into words. I used to ride my bike to class in college. And I would listen to music while I did it. And a lot of the time, I would imagine in my head what it would be like to bike home after a class to get my dream card. And, it happened, multiple times a week. I would just envision this. I would try to put it, together in my head, picturing this happening. And one day, it actually did. And I knew that. Like, I there was a time where I could step aside from myself and understand, leaving a class right now, I just got the notification from USPS that the package had been delivered. And I was about to do what I had always been picturing in my head. Something I had worked for my entire life. Every dollar I had really ever made from, labor or the card industry or anything else, it had gone to bolster this collection. And it was all meant to go towards this overall goal. And it was never guaranteed to happen. And really, it was an out-of-body experience to be able to bike home, get to my mailbox, open the key, and just grab the small flat rate box out of the mailbox. Now, I cried when I missed out on the card, and I fully expected to cry when I got it, but I didn't. I was far too happy to cry in that instance, which, sometimes they say it, regardless of how happy you are, you'll cry if, something like that happens, but not a single tear was shed. And I went into my tiny little apartment room. I ended up putting the graded slab in a new little team bag for it, and I just laid down on my bed. I had a new speaker. Keep in mind, I had to buy a new speaker, obviously, and I threw that thing on, and I played Tuesday's Gone by Lynyrd Skynyrd, just blaring it, and I kept blaring all these songs, and it's something I'll never forget. But if you thought this was the resolution to the story, and it's all said and done, and I can ride off into the sunset, you're wrong. I was immediately tempted to sell this card. Tempted, okay, it's a different word than persuaded, all right? Essentially, I end up messaging someone who is very essential to this story and very essential to my card collecting journey. You see, when the card was on eBay, I was worried about a number of people wanting to make an offer on the Super Auto. The biggest one of them all was a friend of mine, Nick, who I had done business with. Stayed in close contact with Nick, me and him did a lot of business throughout the years, talked a lot throughout the years, but Nick was the one I was most worried about when it was on eBay. And luckily for me, Nick never saw it. Somehow he never saw it. It wasn't on eBay for a huge window, now albeit. But Nick was one of the first person I told once it was in my hands. So I sent Nick a brand new picture of the card on my desk. And he knew it right away. And he sent me this voicemail back.
Don, man, I can't describe in words, man. Congratulations, man. I mean, that's the ultimate for anyone, man. I mean, wow. First, how'd you get it? May I ask how much you paid? If not, it's okay. You don't want to disclose. But, man, congratulations, man.
I mean, just from his voice alone, you could tell he was stunned. And, I didn't really want to brag to him. It was more like, just a, hey, check this out. Kind of like Jackson did with me, And what came next was such a plot twist to everything in the story. Nick offered me $15,000 off the bat. Now, keep in mind, I just paid roughly $6,000 to $7,000 for this card. And he offers me $15,000 off the bat, just doubling what I have into it. I turned it down without even having to think about it. I was flattered by the offer. It was cool to see someone who wanted it just as much as me. But it was a non-factor for me. I had always expected to pay $20,000 for this card. When I, put together my literal bucket list, I had a physical bucket list. Part of it was make $20,000, spend it on the Lincecum Super Auto, bring that thing home. And so really the price I got it at was so good that, I knew that. And that was just icing on the cake. But just because I was wanting to pay $20,000 for the card doesn't mean that's what it's worth to me. Nick would not stop there. Quickly, the offer got up to $25,000, to which I declined immediately again. At this point, Nick was very confused because any logical person would be taking this offer for this card. Maybe not these days, the values of cards have changed. But back then, this was an outstanding offer for the card. So Nick ends up calling me, and he goes, hey man, why would you turn down that offer? And I'm like, I can't do it. And he goes, do 30. And I go, no. And he goes, do 35. And I go, no. And he goes, dude, he literally said, dude, you're in college. Imagine all the parties you could throw for all this money. You would be a king there. And I go, no. Then the story gets a little more weird. So a couple days later, Nick then calls me again. And he goes, hey, I understand you turned down my 35K. I'm kind of maxed out on that bidding, but my friend also wants to buy the card. And I told him about the situation, and he has an offer for you as well. And I go, okay, what is it? I'm not going to not listen to it. And he goes, my friend will do $50,000 for the card. And I go, no. And he was furious. He was like, he literally asked me, he goes, what are you doing? Like, how are you saying no to this? And he goes, it's just a card. And I go, it's not just a card to me. And he goes, well, 50 is not his max. He told me to negotiate for him, and he's going to go higher, but not very much higher. And I go, okay, let's hear it. I'm not going to not take the offer. And he goes, he will do 60. And I go, no. And he goes, 70. And I go, who is offering for this card? Like, I didn't think it was worth that. And obviously the market wasn't that for it. But who is this mystery person? Which was a red flag for me in all of this. I thought it could be made up. It could be, him just messing with me, And so something that really kind of negated that idea was how upset he was getting. It really made me think that the offers were legitimate. And so he goes to 75. And he says, hey, look, he gave me a number to get for him, and 75 is it. And he said, if you don't take 75, you're a crazy person. And I turned it down again. I said, I can't do 75. I'm not going to do it. I just got the card. This was a life goal. This means more to me than money, and I'm not going to sell it. Keep in mind, I'm like 21 in college, making like $6,000 a year on a part-time job, spending all my money on school. And it was wild. And even my roommates were kind of giving me a hard time about it. I worked as a supervisor for a maintenance place, and I'd have to go mop floors. And I remember, I told my roommates about what was going on with the offers, and obviously they were perplexed that I wasn't accepting the money. But I was on my way out the door to go to work to go mop some floors, and so my roommate, also named Nick, he goes, "You gonna go make some minimum wage, mop some floors?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "You're still keeping the card?" And I go, "Yeah." It would be about a week later. The finale of the offers would happen for this baseball card. And I get a call from Nick. He says, "Hey, my buddy does not like taking no for an answer." He's like, "This is a multi-million-dollar guy. He gets what he wants all the time. He collects a lot of these superfractors. He really wants this card." And he goes, "He is ready to offer you $100,000 for the card." He upped his offer completely. He said he's not going to play around anymore. He knows you'll take 6 digits for it. There's no way you don't. And I told him, I go, how would he pay for this? And he goes, "He's got a wire. It's ready. We just need your bank info." And I kind of stood there. At this point it became very real. The deciding factor in all of this was the $100,000 offer was something that was almost forcing me to sell this card. And that sense, in and of itself, was upsetting to me. So I tell him, "Hey, let me think about it. Okay, let me think about this offer, and I'll get back to you." And he goes, "Yes, it's a standing offer. Whenever you want it, we'll do the deal." And I go, "Okay, just give me 24 hours to think it over." And so I end up texting, my mentor in life, Quinn. And I tell him what's going on. I'm like, hey, man, I just got offered $100,000 for the Lincecum Super Auto. And I'm kind of torn on what I should do here because this has gotten very real. And it's gotten to be something where I don't know if I can really, do anything about this. I think I have to do it. And, Quinn was really the only person I needed to hear from. And admittedly, Quinn told me, he just responded and he goes, are you needing shipping supplies or what's the holdup? And I go, no, I just don't know if I want to do it. And he goes, man, I don't know. It's up to you. He literally said, it's up to you. Obviously it's up to me, but he said, I would recommend selling this card. And, it's really never that I go against Quinn's advice. And most of the time, that's a good thing. This time, I went against his advice. I call up Nick and I say, hey, man, I took some time to think about it, and I'm going to have to turn down the $100,000. And again, he was just perplexed. He's like, I cannot believe you're doing this. And he goes, have you told your parents yet? And I go, no. I'm not going to do that. That's not what's going to happen. And he goes, well, you got to tell them, you got to talk to somebody, with logic about this. And I go, no, I'm not going to do it. And I mean, honestly, that's final. And he says, you're sure about this? And a key detail in this story is he goes, man, if you take this $100,000, do you know what you could do with it? And I go, I know what I could do with it. And he goes, no, what you do with it is you go invest in Bitcoin and you get as much of it as you can. And you sit on that, you'll be a millionaire. He was right. I didn't take the $100,000. I got off the phone with him. And I kept the card. He didn't give me any more offers. He did mention that it is a standing offer at the $100,000. And I kept it and I still have it. Needless to say, he was also right about the Bitcoin. I did some math. I don't know how correct it is. It seems about right. It seems maybe low. If I would have invested $100,000 in Bitcoin in 2018, present day 2026, I would have $2.4 million. I have no words. I also have no regrets. I really don't. This card has gotten me through so much in my life. It is one of my biggest backbones. It's something I know it sounds crazy, but I would be lost without it. And I don't regret a thing. And I think the $2.4 million, it's just another awesome thing about this card. And yes, it would be nice to have it, but I'm happy regardless. So that is the story on how I accomplished my dreams in this hobby and got the most wanted card that's ever hit my list. And I'm really happy to have shared that with you guys, and I hope possibly anything I shared today helps you with your plan on how you accomplish your card collecting goals and maybe that special card that you've always wanted and want to obtain. So as always, thank you for watching. Next week, episode 3 will be out. It'll be called 1,000,001, and it's going to be another doozy. So I'll see you then.